Hey viewers, we are going live for the first time directly out of the Eagles Talent Headquarters in South Orange. I'm here with Phil Wilkie,
Right on.
generational expert and keynote speaker.
Yes, sir.
So my first question is a fairly simple one, but for those who may not be familiar, how would you define a generational expert?
All right, good question, Ari. I guess a generational expert is someone who's taken the time to study what makes a generation who they are, and probably more importantly, why. I think with this subject, everyone has an opinion of what generations mean. Everyone is from a generation. Everyone's born in a certain time, so that's something we all share in common. But as an expert, what I try to do is understand some of the nuances from one generation to the next, and really what took place to shape that generation and what those generational personalities are.
Sure. So you said, everyone's from a generation. What are some of the kind of generational labels, I guess, are they called? So, like baby boomers.
Yeah.
Can you
So you
list
mean
some of
like the
them?
good labels, not like the negative
Yeah,
stereotypes?
the positive
Okay,
ones.
the positive ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So to go back in time, let's start with today. So the one that people hear the most about are millennials. And so depending on exactly who you look at, millennials are currently aged roughly 21 to 36 years old. So young professionals, young adults, those would be the millennials. The generation that came before them is called Gen X. Gen X right now is aged 37 to 51 years old. Some very interesting nuances. I'm a Gen Xer. That's right. Then prior to that were the baby boomers, who are currently age 52 to roughly 68, 69 years old. And then before the Gen Xers, actually before the baby boomers were what we refer to as the traditionalists or the silent generation. That would be before them. So the big question is who's coming up after the millennials? We can maybe talk about that if you'd like.
Sure. Well, I think probably one of the most maybe confusing periods to people is the millennial one, because I think a lot of people don't know if they fall into that category, if they're a millennial or not.
Yeah.
So what would you consider the ones coming up now?
All right. Well, as far as a label for the generation after the millennials, history hasn't exactly decided what they're going to be called yet. You can Google it and you'll see lots of different names for them. Probably the most common one is Gen Z, which is kind of like a follow-up to Gen X, then Gen Y, then Gen Z. In fact, they've even began to label the generation after Gen Z as Gen AA. So, but those are kind of, like I said, placeholders. Some people call them Centennials, some people call them, we at Bridgeworth, we call them Gen Edge. So those are some aspects.
Gen Edge?
Gen Edge.
I like that.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
So do we.
I like that
a lot.
A lot
of people like that because they've got an edge about them, and they will be the last generation in America that are predominantly, where Caucasians is a predominant ethnic background. So after that, you're going to see a shift taking place. So they're kind of on the edge of some really big changes.
Okay. So my next question is, I know that you've used the term generational collision before.
Yeah.
Can you share an example of how this takes place in the workforce?
Absolutely. Oh man, there's lots of them. I would say probably one of the most common collisions would be, let's use work ethic, okay? So you've got, and we're gonna work with the largest generations in the workforce today. For the first time in history, you have actually 4 generations in the workplace, just because life expectancy is pushed back, people are loving their jobs and working a little bit longer, but the predominant generations in the workforce today right now are millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers. So if you talk to each generation, they're going to say, man, I work really hard, I have a strong work ethic. But where the collision or the clash point comes in is how each generation defines hard work ethic. So if you talk to baby boomers and you say, what does hard work look like to you? Baby boomers typically go to time. Hard work means you show up early, you stay late, you work through lunch, you come in on the weekends, you do what it takes to get the job done. 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, 70, 80, doesn't matter. You stay until the work gets done. That's what hard work looks like. You talk to Gen Xers and ask them what hard work looks like, it's a little bit different. They'll tell you, I get twice as much done in half the time. A hard worker to an Xer means they show up on time, and from the from word go, they are working their tail off through the day.
Right.
We're the generation that doesn't like to waste time in meetings. We just want to get stuff done so that we can, at the end of the day, say we accomplished more than anybody else, and we can get on to the rest of our life. We were the first generation to really introduce this idea of work-life balance. You know, we're going to work at life, work hard at work, but then we're going to go home and have another aspect to our life as well. We don't want to give up the rest of our lives just for a job. Where the clash really starts to come in is you see some of these previous generations, and they'll look at millennials, and they'll look at, millennials, see them maybe on their phone, Facebooking at work, or Snapchatting. No offense to Facebook, love you. But they're, it's just spending time, and they'll look and say, man, these kids don't work as hard as we do. But here's where the shift takes place. For Gen X and for baby boomers, work was a destination, right? You had to go to the office because that's where the computers were, that's where the phones were. For millennials, work is an idea. You can get work done from anywhere. So often what we hear millennials say is hard work to them means that they're always on. They might be on Facebook at the office sometimes, but you know what? When they're at home, they might pull up their laptop or move out their phone and send some emails to some clients and get some stuff done. Because there's not that separation of work and home, because they can be working all the time, or they can be, at the office, connecting with some friends all the time. Right. So a hardworking millennial is someone who's passionate all day long. And so, but if you don't understand that, depending on which generation you're in, you could look at, if you're a millennial looking at some of those other generations, and you don't work hard, you just work dumb, you're not efficient, you're not, you're just a slave to the job, right? It all perceives and comes across a little bit differently. Right. So what we try to do is help each of the other generations understand what they're saying or what they mean by that work ethic, and then we try to come up with solutions. And to this one, what we point out for all three generations is you guys got to come together and figure out, all right, at the end of the week, what is it that you want to accomplish? Right. And what's the end result? And so with that, then say, okay, if we all agree that we want to get X amount done this week, what does it matter if it takes 60 hours, 10 hours? What does it matter if you're on Facebook at home or at work and to get some stuff done at home that night? As long as at the end of the week, we all accomplish what we set out to do, now we found a way to bridge those different definitions of what work ethic is.
Kind of balance.
Yeah.
I definitely think that's interesting, though, that you bring up kind of the different different generations' definitions of hard work. And I think it's interesting, as a millennial, I think from, older generations sometimes have that mentality that we don't really have good work ethic. Mm-hmm. But I think that, nowadays as a millennial, I get my, work email sent directly to my phone, right, which didn't happen years ago. Yeah. And I'm expected to respond, whether it's during the day or at night, I'm expected to respond because it's known that we have that technology that allows me to get my emails. So I think it's interesting to see how the different generations perceive each other. For sure.
Yeah, and you've described it really well. That's exactly what we try to wrestle with and help that build that understanding. Because those previous generations, they don't understand that quite as well as you do in your shoes. And so we try to put each of the generations in the other generation's shoes to better understand where they're coming from.
Which is, understandable too, that they wouldn't necessarily maybe get it right away. Mm-hmm. So I do think that that's great that we can broaden both, the different generations' perspectives of each other. So that's great. Do you think there's any best ways to avoid generational collision? Or is it something that's necessarily too hard to avoid?
I think with anything, understanding is key. I think they come up naturally. Here's one of the things that I try to do, because I can't anticipate every frustrating situation that's going to come up with across generations. But what I try to do is build that why, build that empathy, so that if you understand some general whys, then when your unique situation arises, you're better equipped to apply it to where you're at. And kind of the analogy I often use is, if you come into work in the morning and one of your coworkers gives you the cold shoulder or brushes you off, human nature is to get frustrated, look at them like, man, what's their problem? And you start to build up all these walls and defenses. But then if someone else comes in and says, oh, did you hear what happened? Someone they care about was in a bad car accident, and so they don't know whether they're going to live or die. Instantly, you know why they gave you the cold shoulder. And then, now you have empathy. Now you're like, what can I do? How can I help out? And so when I help my audiences understand that why for those other generations, what those key factors were that kind of shaped a generational personality, I see that happening over and over. Like, man, I'm not going to take this as personally as I might have before I knew this. Now I understand a little bit better about what makes this generation tick and what they went through when they were coming up. So I think overall that's what we try to do. But I mean, there's going to be stuff that arises because that's life.
Right. And understanding each other and empathy is a huge factor in that, for sure. So I've watched a couple of videos of you speaking, and I noticed that there were many videos where you were addressing younger audiences, possibly students. So what I wanted to know is that younger generation your target audience?
No. My background for 20 years has been working with young people, but I would say my target audience right now is people. I'm intrigued at where people are at, what makes them tick across every level. So for 20 years, I've worked specifically on helping that transition from adolescence into adulthood in a variety of different ways, in the college setting, in the high school setting. That was a big part of my work. Now, what I'm seeing at this stage in my life, a lot of my audiences were those people that I might have helped 20 years ago in that transition. Now they're settled in their career, and what's that next stage? That being said, on a weekly basis, in fact, to give you a case in point example today, this morning I was working with 23, 24, 25-year-old young professionals brought into a company because they saw high aptitude in them, and they're trying to fast track them into positions of leadership. Tomorrow I'm working with people who are going to be in their 40s and 50s who are managers who need to understand who those younger audiences are. So right now, like I say, I've got this, I'm in this unique role where people are my audience, and it
so
doesn't
you're
matter.
across the spectrum.
Across the spectrum.
Right.
I love it, each challenge.
And then, final question.
Yes.
How does your message translate to a corporate audience?
Yeah, okay. Well, again, I kind of bridged a little bit of that transition there. In terms of a corporate audience, the client, those that are paying for me to come present to their folks, they usually they want some return on investment, right? Why are they investing in this? And so with this topic of generations, for us it really is a bottom line type issue. And there's two aspects in which we usually are invited to come and speak I come in on. One might be around building stronger cohesion within the team. And what a lot of companies are wrestling with right now, especially when it comes to these young professionals, is this. And so one of the things that's frustrating our clients is, man, they're spending a lot of money in the recruitment and the getting the onboarding process, and only to lose in 2 years. So they're losing money through that. So one of the things we do, they don't ever want to leave, right? How do we create that right
How to make
experience?
them stay.
Mm-hmm. The other aspect is, bottom line wise, if you're marketing or sales, you're trying to target a particular generation, how can you better understand them or improve your sales? Because when I'm speaking to a boomer, I want to approach it this way. When I'm speaking to, and there's so many millennials right now who own their own businesses, but the way that they want to do business is different than the previous generation. So how can I help this company understand who their market is across the generations, which again, improve their sales and make it a bottom line issue. So ultimately, in the corporate world, that's what appeals to them, is we help improve their productivity, their effectiveness, and their bottom line.
It seems like a lot of it has to do with being able to adapt too, as well, to the changing times.
Absolutely. Yes.
As a business and as an employee of a business, you have to stay on it. You have to be able to adapt consistently and understand things as well.
You got it.
Well, I want to thank Phil for joining us. Thank you again. Be sure to like our Facebook page so you can see future interviews. And remember, here at Eagles Talent, we always inspire, educate, and entertain. Thank you.